I suppose that's one of the side effects, isn't it? Is the lottery, is the lottery in itself, not knowing what your future is going to hold, not knowing how well your body's going to do and what sort of breakdown you're going to have at any point. That's one of the things that kind of pushes you forward. It's the cause of a lot of midlife crises, for example. You know, you sit there at the age of 30, like I am at the minute, or 40, or maybe even 50, depending on how long you reckon you're going to live in the first place. And you think, shit, what have I done with my life? And then you kind of spur yourself forward. You want to learn more, etc. Whereas if you know exactly when you're going to die, or exactly how well you can do, exactly how far you can swim, do you really bother? Or do you just do what you know you can?
Hello and welcome to Trolling with Logic, the podcast where we bring the hammer down on pseudoscience, ignorance, and unreason on a weekly basis. And when I say that, the first time it sounds corny enough, but when I've said it 3 times, it sounds really bad. My name is Nathan. With me is Marty.
Hello.
Hello. And Cal and Jen.
Hi there.
I'm just going to pretend I'm not here to panic you.
Yeah.
Today we're reviewing the 1997 cult science fiction film Gattaca, the story of a not too distant future in which designer babies are commonplace in society, in a future in which a person's worth is measured by the optimal genes with which they are custom designed before birth. This movie is about a future that's not only plausible, but may in fact be inevitable. This film has been assigned viewing in university classes on bioethics, which is mainly what this movie focuses on, more so than the science itself, because it highlights the intersection and conflict between biotechnology and ethics. So what are everybody's initial thoughts about this?
We'll go to Marty first.
Marty hates it.
Yes. Marty, give us your thoughts.
This is take 3, by the way.
Yes, this is take 3.
Okay, so I'm the ADD guy in this...
the Bay Formers fan. He's the Bay Formers fan.
Yeah, so you keep saying, I'm gonna kill you someday. I watch movies for entertainment value, and I just didn't find this movie entertaining. I do agree that it's very well made, and it raises some interesting issues, but it's just not for me. Let's just put it that way.
Yep, and I'm the opposite. I like the slow, pretentious movies quite a lot. So, Marty, you can chime in with your jibe there for me.
Again?
Yes.
Yeah, apparently you like Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Ding, ding. Yeah, there we go. So that's it's a draw right now between...
And in this case, the V'ger cloud is genetic modification.
Yes. But the V'ger cloud, this one moves a lot faster than the V'ger cloud, basically.
Yeah, that it does.
But no, yeah, I really enjoy this. It is my preferred kind of movie. I really enjoy slow-burning science fiction movies. So it's basically, the ideas in that are quite weighty, and this is a movie that gives you plenty to think about at the end. Its production design is fantastic. It's a unique kind of style. I think it's it's kind of been influential in a way that there were quite a few films afterwards that have employed this kind of production design since. Also we haven't discussed this in our outtakes with us, it's worth noting that this was the second writing venture for Andrew Niccol, I believe his name is, and he also wrote The Truman Show. So he's written So he's written 2 fantastic bits of science fiction, in my view. And if you want to see how far downhill he's gone, he wrote The Host, and he wrote that really awful Justin Bieber film with... you remember when the time is the currency? If you've heard about it. See, it's not good.
When you say The Host, you're not talking about the cool South Korean one with like the monster.
No. The Host is a weird movie with some alien that inhabits a teenage girl's body, and it flips round, and it gets very questionable morally because she's in love with this guy. So depending on who's inhabiting her at the time, it's either she's really digging this or it's rapey.
And you can't even say that it's a better love story than Twilight, because the movie is based on a book by the author of the Twilight novels. So
yes, that's where Andrew Niccol's gone. He's gone from making Truman Show, which is a movie which has even got a psychological condition named after it now, Truman Show syndrome. He wrote this, which is, as you said, is presented in bioethics classes, and then he's doing worse stories than Twilight.
Well, they do say the brain starts to deteriorate from the age of 30, so perhaps this is just a normal thing for aging filmmakers.
Yeah, but that's kind of, if you ever wanted to see, I think that's a bigger downfall on M. Night Shyamalan, because M. Night Shyamalan's early movies, they were good, but they're not studied by, philosophers or bioethics committees.
well,
at least M. Night Shyamalan's name sounds like he's having a party, so...
His early movies were fun, and they were interesting in that the whole twist thing. That there's always some really weird twist, and it's but you can only do that so many times.
But yeah, like I said, I just bring that up just to show like the maker of this movie that we're looking at, where he's gone in the future. So if there'd been genetic screening for him, I wonder would they have even let him make these first two movies.
Okay, I sort of have to go back to what I said and clarify something. It's not that I object to movies having a message or something like that. I said this in our last attempt to record this. It's not that I love the Michael Bay style of, that there has to be an explosion, a laugh out loud joke, or a pair of tits every 5 minutes, or I stop watching. That's not it at all. One of my favorite movies of all time is Saving Private Ryan. I mean, there's a movie with a really deep message about on the one hand, you have the horrors of war, and on the other, you have, what is the value of one human life? But you can tell that story in an entertaining way, and that movie does that, and I absolutely love it. It's exciting at certain moments. It's funny, it's entertaining, and has a message. If a movie just has a message, just tell me the message and save me 2 hours.
All right.
That's my take on it.
Whereas, like, for me, it's the pace of this film. Like I say, I find it in a weird way, it's quite hypnotic, the film. And so, like I say, I think just what is entertaining, that's really very subjective from person to person.
Yeah. Another issue is that I rarely watch movies for, artistic appreciation. I have no interest in watching Citizen Kane. Everyone says it's the best movie ever made. But yes, but is it any entertaining? That's a different issue. The Room is entertaining because it's so awful. It's funny.
You're tearing me apart, Marty.
Thank you.
Nathan, I think you have something to say.
What a story, Cal.
Well, going off of what you mentioned briefly a moment ago about this becoming a basis for other similar movies, kind of borrowing the approach and style. Genetic modification has been kind of a staple theme in many science fiction movies since the early 90s, but I think Gattaca...
I was more talking about the look of the film, the very kind of bleak, and as you said, it's very aesthetic, and it's got its own kind of, it's like a very minimalist. But like I'm thinking like later those movies like Equilibrium and things like that, and they borrowed the production design elements heavily. Like it's a style that has carried over into quite a lot of movies. That's kind of more.
Were there any pictures or any pieces of art? I don't remember seeing one now that you mentioned it throughout the entire film. I don't remember seeing anything but blank walls and kind of terminals, and that was about it, really.
It's about a society.
The only art really on display was when they went to listen to the chamber orchestra. But
and that guy was genetically engineered to have 6 fingers, and that's the only way that piece could be played, which was interesting. Well, 6 fingers on each hand, not 6 fingers total. 12 fingers. Weird.
Well, it's a society that values function over form in most areas of life.
Yeah, it's kind of like the society, a lot of, because we're skeptics and that, it's what people imagine, like, if we have a society just purely skeptical, they think that's what it'll be reduced to, there's no sort of imagination or passion, everything's just, cold and sterile and very, like I said, function basically, almost in a way like a Soviet style kind of society. That's kind of what a lot of people imagine. If people were truly skeptical, that's kind of society we would live in.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I understand that is something that some people might believe.
Yeah.
That sort of.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But these are the same people who would say, I don't want to understand the optics to explain a rainbow because that takes away from the beauty of it. Horseshit.
Oh, exactly. And a lot of skeptics, in fact, most skeptics I know are more artistic and enjoy art and enjoy the visual parts of life a lot more than some of the people who perhaps are religious, who are afraid to look at certain things. I mean, let's take, for example, drawing a certain person being illegal in certain things. And us, for example, as skeptics, or every skeptic I know, enjoys a painting, enjoys a view, enjoys scenery. There's very little scenery in this. And in fact, the one moment in the film where they touched on the beauty of the sunrise, it was over a field of solar panels. So you couldn't even see nature in that. And that was quite striking in itself, because it gave this idea that nature kind of didn't exist in that anymore. It was very bleak outlook. It was completely unnatural.
I think utilitarian's the word you're looking for there. Yeah, but on to, like I say, well, Nathan, do you want to do the plot rundown and we can interject as we go along? I say that's kind of the role you seem to be in when we do the movie reviews.
Okay, well, a bit of informational background. This movie presents science as sort of an institutional force in society, which is something I appreciated because it's an accurate depiction of what science is even today, where the greatest policy challenges and decisions facing society all over the world today revolve around and are created by science.
Or the denial of science.
Yeah, that to a troubling degree. The movie refers to genoism, which really drives the plot forward, and that's the idea that discrimination based on a person's genetic profile is inevitable in a society in which manipulation of genes to create the so-called ideal human is commonplace. And it's almost obligatory. It's what everyone is supposed to be doing. So the main character and protagonist, Vincent Anton Freeman, played by Ethan Hawke, dreams of traveling into space, but he was born outside of the program that employs human gene therapy to create the optimalized human being. And so throughout his life, he must struggle to overcome this so-called genoism in order to make his dream a reality. And at the time he was born, the cause and time of his death was known instantly. He was given 30 years to live based on the genetic information. And
plot hole, excuse me, I didn't bring this up any of the other two times you say it, but wouldn't they be able to tell that, before he was born? Like, couldn't they do a prenatal screening, and so they could abort this guy who's going to die early anyway?
Yeah, but you remember he was conceived the sort of old-fashioned way, and I think that's what it's implied, that if you have one this way, then it's you do the screening kind of, it's more done at birth.
Yeah, whatever.
There's an unreasonable amount of accuracy put on this as well. I mean, the heart thing that they said he was going to have from birth happened, but the actual death from it, you couldn't for certain say that it was after 30 odd years, 30 point whatever it was years, and that was a little bit ridiculous. But yeah, it's statistics, isn't it?
But it's like I've said in the other takes we've done on this show, that the space program screening for possible heart issues, it's hard to disagree with that, really, in a way, because we spoke about this with Abby Harrison back, that, they do screen you out. You've got to be in peak physical condition because it's very physically demanding, and you don't want one of your pilots just keeling over halfway into the flight.
Yeah,
because the whole
makes sense.
Yeah, so that's part of the film. It's something, when you think about it, they're actually quite in the right, the space program, to maybe reject this guy on the, if this genetic screening, if it's worked so well for them in the past, that they may be quite fairly justified in rejecting the guy.
Yes, because this is a story in which astronauts go into space wearing tuxedos. That's how perfect they are.
It's because they're the Men in Black. It was a prequel to Men in Black. Didn't you realize that?
Oh. So after Vincent is born and they get this information about how screwed up his genetics are. They have their second child in the
what has become the natural way, I think they say.
Well, they have the second child engineered, basically.
Yeah, so where they choose all the traits that they want. And I got the sense that maybe the rundown they gave of all these things that are wrong with their first child was something that might be in that world required by law. So if parents choose to have children the old-fashioned way, some regulatory requirements would make it so that the doctors on hand would have to read out these things that are wrong with them to kind of pressure parents into producing offspring that are genetically engineered to be desirable in society. And so that's what happens. They have their second child genetically engineered to have all these traits that are desirable. And that creates a sibling rivalry of sorts where they grow up.
But hang on. One thing that I found interesting there is that to people who haven't seen this movie, they don't actually genetically engineer so much as screen for, which would be the best embryos. They fertilize a lot of them and sort of they narrowed it down to I think they said the 4 best ones. So it's not that they sort of manipulate the genes. They pick the one. What did they say? It's still you. It's just the best of you, or something like that.
I think they did actually do manipulation though. That when he was discussing it did sound as if they did do manipulation. Yeah, because he was saying that you could try and get pregnant 100 times and you wouldn't have this baby. I think they were picking and choosing the elements from the different embryos that they would combine into the final fetus. That's the impression that I got.
That's not how I understood it. But okay, never mind.
Yeah, it's kind of very selective in vitro fertilization. I think that's the method being used.
And apparently they weren't particularly selective about the size of penises, so that kind of didn't go into it, yeah. Which the doc said when in one of the opening scenes, it is, in fact, in the first couple of opening scenes, isn't it? He goes, I don't see cocks like that coming through anymore. And he turns around and he goes, I see my fair share of cocks. So really casually, these days people are afraid of looking at each other penises in the toilet. And the doc's just looking at him going, yeah, it's nice. Do I tell you that every time? Yeah, you tell me that every time, yeah. All right, okay. That was a bit bizarre. But yeah, apparently they don't care about penises anymore. Hey-ho.
Yep, that killed that.
And the room went silent because I'm the only person thinking about penises. No, carry on.
But yeah,
genetic perfection is sought by many.
Yeah, it is. And well, that's the whole thing. The parents kind of regret. It's never really expanded on why they went for Vincent, why they went the old-fashioned. Were they just sort of literally kind of romantics for the old-fashioned way of doing it? I mean,
or it could have been unplanned. I mean, we see them in the car in the beginning. That sort of gives me the impression that this was just a spur of the moment sort of thing.
How much sexual enjoyment do you think happens in that future though? Because I got the impression that it was my kind of future where sex didn't really happen that much anymore. It wasn't really a thing.
That's the impression I got as well. It just seemed very emotionally dull.
Wow, I wouldn't say that, but I mean, I would say definitely they portrayed it as such. I don't think that it would necessarily need to be that way simply because sex is no longer part of it. But I got the impression that was the way they pushed it. Yeah, so people are very distant from each other, very kind of this kind of professional professionalism about it. It's called professionalism.
In a weird way, it could be like a kind of commentary on some of the the social attitudes that they existed kind of maybe 2 decades ago. There's still some like this, but about the whole unplanned pregnancy and the sex before marriage, it might be a little bit of commentary. I think in this society, would they view people who have their children the old-fashioned way? Would they view them in the same way? So, you didn't think about your children and what was best for them in the long run, or being stable and actually going out and selecting your child properly. I think there's maybe a little. I
see what you're saying. Yeah,
I mean, that could have been an area for this movie to explore a little bit, but yeah, it was more focused on the overcoming, in a society like this, overcoming what you've been predetermined with. And so, Nathan, the sibling rivalry, that's something that plays out over the whole movie. And can you explain how they illustrate that?
So the first way they illustrate that is pretty iconic throughout. It's the swimming race that they engage in as boys to see who can swim out the farthest out to sea before one of them gets scared and turns back. And that is a bit of foreshadowing for what happens later in the film, both literally and kind of symbolically, where one of them, the one that's not expected to surpass the other in ability, actually does.
Yeah, because eventually what happens is in this game that Vincent one day he challenges him and then manages to best Anton, and he actually ends up having to save Anton from drowning.
Yeah.
I think it's because Anton he knows his limits, doesn't he? And that's his problem, because he never goes further than that. He doesn't push the boundaries of what he's expected to be able to do because of his genetics. He kind of lives to his genetics. Whereas Vincent wants to live beyond them. He wants to do better than he's been earmarked to do in his life. So, earmarked, I don't know if it's the right word. But
it's the kind of classic underdog story. He's been told you won't amount to much, and he says, well, I'll prove you wrong then. I'll do it.
I suppose that's one of the side effects, isn't it? Is the lottery, is that the lottery in itself, not knowing what your future is going to hold, not knowing how well your body's going to do and what sort of breakdown you're going to have at any point. That's one of the things that kind of pushes you forward. It's the cause of a lot of midlife crises, for example. You know, you sit there at the age of 30, like I am at the minute, or 40, or maybe even 50, depending on how long you reckon you're going to live in the first place. And you think, shit, what have I done with my life? And then you kind of spur yourself forward. You want to learn more, etc. Whereas if you know exactly when you're going to die, or exactly how well you can do, exactly how far you can swim, do you really bother? Or do you just do what you know you can?
Yeah, that makes sense. So Vincent leaves home and disappears basically from his family's life and goes out into a number of odd jobs, mostly cleaning jobs, because as a so-called invalid or invalid, that's the role that the society has placed him in as what he's supposed to be doing. The full potential he has is cleaning things, basically. And from that point on, he trains himself and pushes himself to travel into space.
What was that big courtyard place where at one point in the film the police officers said, "Oh, this is where all the invalids are"? I couldn't figure out that part of the film.
Those people were referred to as degenerates, so I got the sense that they were actually lower in status than the invalids.
Okay, I didn't understand that part of the film. I didn't understand why there would be a certain place where they would find these individuals for that particular plot device. But we'll maybe get to that later on. Because plot, yeah, that was a bit disconnected from the rest of it. That was one of the bits that didn't really fit for me. Because at one point in the film, they're talking about it's illegal to discriminate against people based on their genetics, but companies ignore it. And then you have this massive divide being shown in the film where they have got, you know, this clear discrimination, this clear place where they go. It's almost like they were trying to do it like with black people in America. Oh, the coppers always go to this neighborhood to find the bad people, you know, and in this one, it's always go to this neighborhood to find the bad people or the people who they think less of. It was this weird kind of racist divide going on, which wasn't shown in the rest of the film. Did you guys notice that, or is it just me?
No, I didn't really pick up on that.
I just thought I know which scene you're talking about. I thought that seemed a little exaggerated, I guess you could say, because they don't portray invalids as bums or criminals. They portray them as people who just can't have the fancy jobs, so they get to clean. They're the people working at McDonald's their entire lives. They're not the people selling drugs on street corners.
Anyway, let's not jump on that, I suppose.
Yeah, so where were we with the plot, Nathan?
Well,
he wants to go to space. And
I think at this point, that's where the other part is introduced, that he meets this... he was meant to be a champion Olympic swimmer, and at this point in the movie, we're told that he was paralyzed in a car accident, and Vincent takes on his genetic identity in a way.
Yeah, he carries packets of his piss and blood around with him and skin flakes and distributes them to pretend they're his own bodily flaking, whatever.
Because in a weird way, the whole
this leads to something that I never understood in this movie. They are constantly screening people to check that they are still genetically superior. They're not just checking them when they're... I mean, okay, so they check the guy when he gets the job. Only genetically superior can apply for this job. Okay, so you give a DNA sample. Okay, check. You've got good genes. Then, like, once a week or whatever, it seems like it's something like that, or you know, at random, just like, you know, they do random drug tests. They do random DNA tests to check that you are still genetically superior.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this might be like a deleted scene kind of issue.
No, they did explain it. They did explain it. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. They explained it because they'd got to the point where they'd become so desensitized to how people look that they didn't even look at photographs anymore. So the IDs, the photographs on there, they didn't really care. They could look vaguely similar and they wouldn't notice the difference between the person. So the idea of having like this, instead of having a fingerprint scan or anything like that, they had the blood thing because the blood was checking the DNA. And that was the reason for it, because because of their lack of art, because of all that kind of stuff, they just didn't recognize people anymore by their features.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, that
And
would
that
make
was an
sense.
essential plot device in the entire film as well, because the two main people in the film didn't really look anything alike, but they accepted them as each other.
Oh, yeah. It does make sense now because Jerome doesn't look anything like Vincent. They're completely different people.
No, I got that, but they still look similar enough that I mean he has to fix his height, things like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, vital statistics, but that is something you put on if you think about a passport, if you took the photograph of a passport, you've still got in the microchip the basic dimensions of that particular individual, about their face, all that kind of stuff. And it's like a biometrics thing as far as that's concerned. So it's not really visual still. It's just a statistic about that particular person's dimensions. And so that was important, yeah, because they had the scanners at the front thing checking stuff like that, which they had to walk through. But visual identification, it didn't really matter because their facial features were similar-ish. They were both white men,
Yeah, and it's
approximately
kind of
6 foot tall.
and a result of being in this society now that where genes are everything, they've forgotten about, you know, your looks and all that. Yeah, it does make sense in that perspective.
Whatever. I think it seems kind of silly that people stop using
The other way would
people's
be that
appearances to identify
that
them.
maybe
I mean,
just because it's
how do
just sorry, I was going to say the other explanation they could have given is just because it's the space center, they need ultra high security, and maybe there has been a history of invalids trying to get in.
Another thing could be completely unrelated to that, because you've got to remember that even in the future where you have people who are born perfect, so to speak, in inverted commas, you also still have diseases that can rewrite DNA that can cause issues like this. I mean, for example, you've got ticks in the United States at the minute that they can rewrite your DNA slightly to give you an allergy to meat. So anything like a disease or something like that could potentially cause issues would need to be screened for, say, every week or so, especially in the space program. Because if you did get some sort of an illness that actually affected you down to a level where you couldn't get better from it, then you wouldn't be valid anymore.
To me, it just seems like an exaggerated plot thing. So, yeah,
Maybe.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, you would think that because you like Transformers. So, we'll forget that.
Yeah, but Vincent's using Jerome's genetic material, you know, to get onto the Gattaca program. It's called the Gattaca program, which is the space program, and he eventually gets himself a job as a navigator on a trip to Titan. And this is kind of like because he's a janitor, and his invalid job is, you know, cleaning up all the time, but also to do his, you know, this other job that he's wanting, he has to really he has to clean himself completely every day, scrub and, you know, groom himself too. Which is kind of a weird reflection on, like, no matter which way he chose, he's got to keep himself clean, you know. When he's invalid, he has to keep all of them clean. And then when he gets into the higher class, he's got to keep himself clean then.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting point. So it's at this point that he meets Uma Thurman's character, Irene, and she's somebody who also has conflict in her life, but kind of from a different angle. She's genetically superior, but has an unacceptable chance. How did she put it? An unacceptable
chance of heart problems or something like that. Was it heart failure?
Yeah, so she's constantly insecure about her own genetics, but she's unknowingly attracted. She's attracted to a man, unbeknownst to her, is supposed to be genetically inferior to her.
And this is something quite poetic as well, because they've both got problems with their heart. And it's this whole falling in love thing and being related to a heart that I saw. Maybe that symbolism wasn't intentional, I don't know. But I thought it was sort of this whole, they're both flawed. They're both flawed in the same place, and they're flawed in their hearts. And then they fall for each other.
Yeah, I didn't get that, but yeah, that's quite an interesting interpretation of that part. But yeah, to expand on that, that's when it's around this time that Vincent learns that the Jerome whose genetic identity he's been borrowing, it wasn't a car accident, that Jerome actually threw himself in front of a car because he finished second in a swimming tournament. And it's basically that he was designed to be the best swimmer, but ultimately he didn't, and that just triggered his, because he's basically a depressed character. He's an alcoholic and he's in a wheelchair and all that. So, it's also the other side of the society that, it's not just your genetics. There's some ability and instinct and your own determination have to play a part in it as well.
Oh, definitely. And also not living up to your or fulfilling your purpose in life that you've been provided through this genetic thing is also obviously something that's very damaging to you as an individual.
Yeah, and it's also what I think is a huge problem with creating a society like this, that the fact that someone has high potential does not guarantee that they live up to it. I mean, they could be lazy, but it could also be a case of, an accident, you're paralyzed and you were supposed to be a swimmer.
And it could also just be down to...
He cannot live up to his potential, but you could have an invalid who lives up to his potential, but he's not allowed to do that. Yeah, even exceeded, but he's not allowed to try. We see that Vincent is perfectly capable of doing his job, a job that requires him to have this superior genetic makeup. Clearly that requirement is stupid because he can do it anyway.
Did you get the impression though that there's one thing about this whole thing about the guy not being able to have his legs fixed or have his mobility back versus all these people made perfect? I got the impression that perhaps the idea was to make people immune, etc., from birth, and therefore they didn't have to worry about medics afterwards. And maybe that's where it went. Maybe medicine was put to one side and not really thought about as much, not really developed as much. And maybe this was the reason that this guy was still in a wheelchair. In a future where you send, 12 rockets or more up every single day, and where everybody has got the perfect genetics, and yet one person in a wheelchair can't be fixed. It seemed a bit ridiculous, but I'd need to know a bit more of the backstory about that to understand why that was the case.
That happens in all sci-fi things. You need the condition that can't be cured. Picard is bald.
Yeah, but he doesn't care, does he? And at least his head is cool.
But it is. There'll just be... It's like the weird thing, probably, you just cannot predict what conditions will be cured or not. I mean, there's some where obviously there is research and it'll be cured soon, but there's then others that just, they might just be completely, unrepairable years and decades into the future. And maybe just paralysis is just one of those things. It'll just be impossible.
How many non-whites were there in the film, by the way? Because I was a little bit worried about there being another form of eugenics going on, because I didn't see any kind of ethnic diversity in it at all, and I don't know whether that was intentional.
I think that's just standard Hollywood filmmaking, really.
Was that what it was?
Yeah. I think that's all that. You can just boil that down to. I don't think that's just the way films were made. Still, it's kind of changing right now, but I think it's just the way movies have always been made.
Yeah, I think in 97 it was still acceptable to not have the full diversity quota met.
But yeah, there's so I had a thought about that there and it's gone now. Damn it!
Callum, get it back.
But I was going to say the whole Jerome thing. That's also got parallels to the way some parents are now of trying to force their kids on this path that they want, trying to live through them. And I wonder if the genetics in the society, is that kind of an extension of that, maybe like a kind of commentary on that theme? Because I know probably, don't want to get too much into your job, Marty, you probably see this time to time in school, that there are some kids where the parents are just say, you're going to be the great...
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to be the top scorer for the school soccer team, and that's it. And the kid's like, I just want to do math all day. That's it. Because there's that part where you said about the potential. There's just some kids that, they've got great potential for this, but I actually want to do this instead. That's what I really want to do.
Exactly. And I have actually advised several people. I don't know what this is like in other countries. I think it's pretty different. But in high school in Sweden, we have sort of programs, what courses you pick. It's kind of like picking your major in college. I get a lot of kids who should be taking something that is, geared toward, some form of manual labor, because they just don't have academic talents, but their parents want them to go down the academic route and prepare for college. And and you can just tell these kids it's not right for them. They suck at those subjects, but they might be brilliant at, artistic expression, or they might be, give them an engine and some tools, and they can fix a car, but they hate learning about the mathematics behind the whole thing. Well, so let them be a mechanic instead of an engineer.
Because you get that feeling with the Jerome character here, his parents probably were trying to live out their dream of having the champion swimmer as their son.
Yeah, it seems like it. Because why the hell would you genetically engineer someone to be the perfect swimmer if you didn't want him specifically to be a good swimmer? Doesn't make much sense.
Going along a similar kind of vein with the pianist as well, with the 12 fingers. Now, I don't know, my mind goes weird places when I think of pianist, 6 fingers, and what would a man think about this? I just couldn't help but think, right, pianist sounds like penis, 6 fingers, a bloke's always going to think, well, what the hell would that feel like with the extra finger on there? But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, well, Jen, you're living down to expectations as always on the show.
Excellent. I wouldn't want to disappoint. Talking about disappointing, he could point with an extra finger as well. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah,
it could be turn the stink. Sorry, carry on.
So back to the actual plot of the film. I couldn't come up with a witty link to change the subject there.
Oh,
yeah.
Dear.
So what happens is the flight director gets murdered because he wants to delay the flight or the space program, which wasn't clear to me. I don't know if I missed something, even though I've seen it 2 or 3 times, but the flight director wants to delay the project, and so he ends up being murdered. It's not explained why he wanted to delay the project.
Because plot.
Yeah. So he gets murdered by, at first, an unknown culprit, and of course the law enforcement immediately suspects an invalid. And that's the first group they target in their investigation.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, see that, is that just sort of like a commentary on how, well, just to take the modern day example, an explosion goes off in a city right now.
Suspect is blackmail.
No, it's because they found an eyelash. It's because they found his eyelash very near the crime scene.
Right.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that he has anything to do with it.
Yeah, but the idea was that there shouldn't be any invalids in there.
That they assume.
Yeah, but they're saying there shouldn't be an invalid in the building. There's an invalid in the building. Therefore, the invalid is the prime suspect because he's the only one who shouldn't have been there. That was the thinking of the plot.
Yeah, I got that.
So, basically the cops in the future are still into profiling. That's pretty much it. It hasn't changed in the slightest.
Clearly.
It's probably, I would say this is one of the weaker plot elements, this whole murder mystery. It could have been constructed a little bit better.
I thought it was unnecessary.
Yeah. No, it could have been introduced better that, I don't know, that maybe there had been this administrator, he was maybe in trouble or there was some controversy surrounding him, and they could have beefed that story up a little bit more. It was just very thin how they introduced this administrator and his death and that, because it didn't seem to really impact the space pro. It would only seem to serve this kind of plot regarding Vincent. You know, if they had if they'd had his like death,
extra careful now.
Yeah, if they had his death, basically had more impact on the world surrounding it, and not just the tiny little window we're watching with Vincent. That's what I say. It just felt a little bit thin. They maybe didn't kind of flesh that out as much as it could have been. Yeah, so they say they find an eyelash and like the suspicion. Do they just go straight? I'm trying to remember now because I watched this a few days ago. But so do they go straight to Vincent investigating him? What happens after this?
Well, the investigators find one eyelash that belonged to Vincent before he borrowed Jerome's genetic identity. So it was just one of those stray pieces of himself that was shed, and it just happened to be not one of Jerome's. So Vincent's old identity and information came up in the database. And so Vincent became worried that they would recognize him, his old self, when he was an invalid. And that's when we get into the dialogue that we talked about or alluded to earlier, where Jerome tries to reassure him that no, they won't recognize you because they won't even care. If you're valid and if you're not an invalid and they think that you're supposed to be there, they won't even look twice at you or suspect you at all.
As long as your genes are good, that's it. Nothing else matters.
And it's worked so far.
But they do have an exceptionally good investigator who does end up seeing through it, and which requires eventually Vincent to have to go on the run and actually assault one of the detectives, and
then have some hot sex in an alleyway behind a grate. It was great sex. Sorry, that had to be said.
And she didn't seem to mind that he just assaulted a police officer for
made it
no
quite
apparent reason.
It made it quite horny, didn't it? It's like, a bit of drama in my life at last.
Yeah.
Say nothing. Don't speak.
But they eventually find out who the actual killer was. And like I said, we alluded to that. It was actually the mission director was the killer. And he killed the administrator because he was threatening to cancel the mission, which seems like a bit of self-sabotage. Because if that happened at NASA, that would really hold up a mission that... You know, they wouldn't let the mission just go ahead when, you know, the administrator's gone and murdered the flight director. That would have a big impact on the mission because there's morale, and it would affect the whole workplace. So they would probably reschedule the entire thing. So it seems like that seems like a really daft reason to commit that murder.
They do say, though, and this is something that I reacted to, that this was a mission that could only be done once every 70 years. Which would explain why they would still go on with it even after this. But that also means, why the hell would anyone even think about canceling it? And I want to know, as a space geek, why is it only possible once every 70 years? Because
there was something about the trajectory.
Are not that rare. Yeah, but launch windows are not that rare.
There was something about the trajectory that they kept replotting. They had a very, very lax, not very particularly in-depth explanation of it, where he kept checking it over and goes like, right, okay, we need to make sure this is the right path. Is this the right thing? And they showed sort of the rocket slingshotting around around a planet, and then I don't know if it was the sun, and whether they're going to go to the center and then via the sun and then slingshot around or whatever.
Yeah, it had to be something really complicated like that. But did they say anything about how long the trip was going to take?
No.
Oh, well, actually, they might have done, because he did talk about the trip and how long it would take, but I can't remember what they said. Was it 2 years?
No, it was a 1 year manned mission. And it wasn't made clear whether... I got the impression they were talking about spending 1 year on Titan, and they weren't referring to the time it would take to travel there.
Okay.
Whatever. It seems real. Just the idea of a launch window that only happens once every 70 years. It seems a little exaggerated to me. But that's it's plot. So
it's sci-fi. Yeah. It's not actual science. So, really.
Yeah, but then so we're getting to the conclusion of the movie, and this is when you discover we should have a dun 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 effect that one of the detectives
dun, dun,
is
dun.
Actually Anton from earlier on.
No!
Gasp.
You mean the detective?
And everybody was so shocked they were silent.
No, well, it's a nice. Well, you kind of had a feeling Anton would turn up in some capacity, but no, it wasn't like a little. It was an interesting twist. This.
Yeah, the swimming bit at the end was interesting as well, because it kind of it said what everyone thought all along. You know, he didn't think within his limits, and he said then, I didn't save anything for the trip back. The only reason I made it is because I didn't save anything for the trip back. But that in itself didn't make a lot of sense either, because if you know how far you can swim and you're a strong swimmer, and you have saved something for the swim back, surely you would be the one then swimming and kind of saving the brother, the one who hasn't got that kind of genetic within him. And that was a bit odd, because as soon as he turned back, he was just like, oh no, I haven't got any energy left. And he drowned, or tried to drown twice, even though he'd saved something for the tank back. Whereas his brother, who hadn't, according to him, was fine and saved him and did back crawl and was absolutely fine, wasn't even out of breath. So I was like, okay. But yeah, swimming. I can't stand swimming.
Yeah, but it's on the launch day that
I do know
Jerome hands Vincent a bag full of DNA samples, saying that it's enough to last him 2 lifetimes for his return back.
Which is very interesting, but yeah.
And then he puts himself in an oven.
Yeah.
Yeah, he puts himself in his swimming cozy and he puts his medal on and incinerates himself.
Which was like, oh, okay. Well.
But I think that's it's kind of, in a way, it's just a release for him that Vincent's now achieved what he couldn't. You know, Vincent's gone above his limits, and Vincent's actually done what he really wanted, which Jerome, like I said, he was forced onto this path. So, like, and
he was a better swimmer as well, and he didn't even know it.
Yeah. No, but it is just like for Jerome, it's a release for him that Vincent's finally, you know, gone and done. What
a way to go, though! What a way to go, though, right? Burning yourself alive in an incinerator. He could have gone so many other ways, but he just put himself in an incinerator. I was like, okay, why? Why would you do that? But then they had it coincided with the rocket scene taken off, didn't it? So it was as if, I suppose, in a way, he was putting himself.
But it was also that, and it's probably to basically get rid of all his remaining genetic trace.
Yeah. I think there's a bit of symbolism involved here as well, because the silver medal in the flames looks like a gold medal.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
But from the plot point of view, it's basically, I said that he's just getting rid of his own remaining genetic material. Because, if he stays alive and if he gets a scan on that, they'll find, oh, but aren't you meant to be halfway to Titan at the moment? How did you manage this?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then they'll ring up the spaceship and they'll be like, right, guys, you got to turn around now, right? You got the wrong guy on board. And they'll be like, the driver of the spaceship would be going, right, we're going to turn this spaceship around. And then they would fly back. And the fluffy dice in the windscreen would just be dangling, the driver would be really angry.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
It's one scene we've missed out there is as Vincent's going on board the spacecraft, they do yet another genetic check just as he's coming in, but he doesn't have any material on him at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, because the doctor tells the story about his kid, doesn't he?
Yeah, the doctor.
And he knew all along, yeah.
Yeah, that should have been hinted at earlier on in this movie. Because that does feel
it kind of was, wasn't it?
It just feels like, just to suddenly introduce it at the end, it just feels a bit plot device-y. It doesn't, it's not organic.
But also,
yeah.
It did kind of work.
Any purpose.
It did kind of work, because he could have also at the same time went, look, you're a beautiful penis, man. I'll let you through anyway. Don't worry about it. It's cool. And that would have been just as good as my kid is also not perfect, I think.
But no, I think
because he likes his knob.
Yeah, it should have been hinted at a lot more earlier, and it would have suited the climax. It just came out a bit clunky, that part, for me. I
suppose, yeah. But it also shows that there's still an underlying sort of natural humanity in the human race as well that sort of exists. You know, this whole rigmarole, this whole
of the valid
system that exists. Yeah, the whole system that exists. It doesn't control everybody. People live by it, but people still have their own beliefs underneath that. They're not robots.
Basically, the old kind of trope that you can't dampen the human spirit at all, and that's what the thing that the human spirit triumphs over and all of that. Yeah.
I just hope that some of the invalids that got onto rockets were actually flat earthers. That many launches, you got to have a few on there.
But yeah, that's that's pretty much where the movie ends. It ends with Vincent on the craft heading out towards Titan, and the note he has is just a small lock of Jerome's hair. That's all it is.
What was the meaning of that? I didn't quite grasp the meaning of him having a lock of his hair, unless it was just to leave it random places.
Yeah, Nathan, do you have a explanation? Say, what do you think is the symbolism to that? Because I wasn't too sure about that myself.
Yeah, I don't really have a theory on hand for that myself. I just kind of interpreted it as a sentimental thing, like the last piece of genetic material that exists on Earth from the person whose identity he borrowed.
Yeah. So
well, aside obviously from the pieces he
the fridge full of piss.
Yeah, I just completely forgot about the whole fridge full of 2 years worth of his. But I don't know what that was supposed to symbolize, whether it was a sentimental thing or not.
I'm wondering if it's just Jerome, kind of like a piece of me is going to go with you, sort of thing. I'll be with you there.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, he was just saying, "I'll be here with you," or "I'm still here."
Oh yes.
Yeah. Come on, you guys must have some puns as well. Oh God.
I just don't remember it.
But did any of you guys think that he was going to die as he was actually lifting off? Like that would be the culmination of his life's work, and as he was looking at the stars, he would just pass away, and it would cut back to him, and he's dead.
The first time I saw it, I thought it'd be one of those. The camera would slowly pull out, and you'd start to see him slump over, and then it would cut. So it kind of one of these ambiguous endings. That's what I felt was going to happen the first time I saw it, but it ends on a positive note anyway. I think that's probably the best way it could have ended, because the rest of the film, like I say, it's a pretty bleak world that he lives in. So, to give that kind of hope at the end was quite a nice touch, I thought.
Were there any female astronauts on that rocket, or was it all men?
I can't remember.
I don't remember seeing very many female astronauts, apart from one on a treadmill in that entire film.
Because it is something about, like we mentioned this earlier, the design of the film is that the characters all look very generic in it. It's like a very bland, like the fashions and just the general styles of people. It's almost like kind of the weird, a Star Trek-y kind of, like where, the features are all very bland and generic amongst humans. But I would say that the one parallel I found with this, with the whole identity thing, and Marty, we're going into Star Trek territory, so you can cheer, is the Deep Space Nine episode Far Beyond the Stars. I mean, there's definitely a part of that, and for Nathan and Jen, it's sort of like a fantasy episode of Star Trek where Benjamin Sisko, Ben Sisko, you two guys, yep. Yeah, so who he is, and it's kind of, he has this kind of hallucination that he's a science fiction writer in the 50s, and the office decides to have an open day so they can see who all the authors are, but he's told to stay home because they don't want any of the readers to think that, there's a black guy writing your science fiction story. So that's a nice little parallel kind of story to this. And you could take it as the whole racism thing years ago. That probably stuff like that did go on. But yeah, shall we start to wrap up there with some final thoughts?
Sure.
We'll go to Jen first.
Oh, you're coming to me first? Final thoughts about Gattaca. I hope that's not the future. As much as I want science to progress and for our reach to extend beyond our planet as far as possible, and for us to understand more about the universe and, be able to stop diseases and all that kind of stuff, I hope we don't lose the things that actually make life interesting. I hope that the only goal in life isn't to be a scientist, isn't to be somebody who goes out into another planet. I hope that people still enjoy themselves in many other ways on our planet, and that our planet isn't left in the dust while we search somewhere else. I think it's a sad view of the future that the most beautiful thing you ever see is a sunrise over a field of glass. So yeah, I mean, I found it a little bit bleak, a little bit sort of science phobic in a way. But yeah, it had some positive moments to it. Fingers crossed the future is brighter.
I think my favorite aspect of the film is the symbology that's sprinkled throughout. I'm thinking specifically of the thing that jumped out immediately to me first is the spiral staircase in Jerome Morrow's apartment that he has to drag himself up to get to his seat just in time so he can fit the alibi that was given to him. And throughout the film, there's a lot of focus on human biota. It's everywhere in the movie. It's sprinkled throughout. There's blood, hair, skin flakes, and bits like that. all over the place throughout this movie. It's almost like a prop and like a constant reminder of all these unpredictable things about ourselves that we can't hide from. I also liked the fact that the film's title itself is derived from the 4 nucleobases of DNA, guanine, adenine, thymine, and cytosine, which spell out GATC, Gattaca. That's what the title is based off of. So I liked the symbolism. I actually liked the minimalism and the sparse architecture. I liked the way the architecture speaks to the storyline and it's almost a character in and of itself. And I also like kind of the juxtaposition of what exactly is the final frontier of human discovery, whether it's like an open question that's presented to the viewer. Is it space or is it our own genetic code and who we are as human beings?
Marty?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what's been said so far. The movie is, it's an interesting idea. The movie does what it sets out to do very successfully. It's just not for me.
Whereas, I'll just say, I love this film. Like, it sounds like I've nitpicked away, but it's just kind of the nature of the show. And like any film that you like, when you go and watch it, you will find flaws in it. No movie's perfect, but I really enjoy this. So it's one I revisit quite a lot. If it's ever on TV, I'll always sit down and watch it. And it's just, like I say, it's up there on my list of movies of all time, I would say easily. It's like just a very well constructed, really good ideas. It will have you thinking for nights afterwards. It's just a really nice slice of science fiction. And it's one that's not talked about too much really in kind of science fiction circles. It's, like I said, it went unnoticed and it's got a bit of a cult following now, but not nearly as big as I think it deserved.
Yeah, I had to wait for either the VHS or DVD release. I had to wait for some home video release for it to gain the following it did. And I think that's what...
I'm yet to see it on Blu-ray or in high definition, and I think it would look quite really nice on that. So, because like I said, it was just a standard definition copy I watched the other day. So I would like to see it in, really nice high def to see how those visuals come out.
It's on Amazon at the moment, so if you want to have a look at it on there, I think it's the standard definition for the time, but it's good enough quality. That's where I watched it. So if anyone wants to rent it, I think it's $2.50 on Amazon, or buy it for £5 to stream. So,
all right, and I think with that, Nathan, we can wrap up there.
All right, that was our review. I don't know how rambly this is going to turn out sounding, but...
all rambly are reviews.
Yeah, we're still kind of, I wouldn't say struggling, but we're still kind of new to the territory of reviewing good movies. It's still a lot easier for us to review bad movies, just because we can go through scene by scene with bad movies and talk about everything that's wrong with it, whereas it's kind of harder to talk about good movies in a linear fashion, or relatively good movies.
But saying that, we've got one more good movie next week, and then after that, we've got a trilogy of utter shitness.
Utter shit.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Capricorn 1, and then after that, we're going to talk about Mission to Mars and Red Planet. And
you can hear the excitement in Barty's voice. I think you are actually... You've wanted to talk about these movies in a video somehow, Marty, and so you're getting your chance now.
But before that, we'll be talking about Doctor Strangelove, which is one of my all-time favorite films. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you all next time.
Bye.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Trolling with Logic. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. If you love the show, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Supporting us at $5 or more per episode will get you access to exclusive, patron-only bonus content, early access to shows before everyone else, and other incentives. We are an amateur production, but with your patronage, we can help improve our audio quality and cover the costs for doing the show. We are grateful for anything you can pledge to the show. Go to www.patreon.com/trollingwithlogic to sign up if you are so inclined. We want to thank our 3 patrons who currently have chosen to support us. These patrons are Microbloganism, Josh at the Society for the Advancement of Science, and Avinash Kumar. Thank you very much for your support, which is helping us out. Thanks to you 3, we have now been able to hire a professional audio editor, so now you can all look forward to higher quality audio. If you have any suggestions for topics or guests you would like to hear on this show, let us know on Twitter or on our Facebook page. Thanks again for listening.
I suppose that's one of the side effects, isn't it? Is the lottery, is that the lottery in itself, not knowing what your future is going to hold, not knowing how well your body's going to do and what sort of breakdown you're going to have at any point. That's one of the things that kind of pushes you forward. It's the cause of a lot of midlife crises, for example. You know, you sit there at the age of 30, like I am at the minute, or 40, or maybe even 50, depending on how long you reckon you're going to live in the first place. And you think, shit, what have I done with my life? And then you kind of spur yourself forward. You want to learn more, etc. Whereas if you know exactly when you're going to die, or exactly how well you can do, exactly how far you can swim, do you really bother? Or do you just do what you know you can?
Hello and welcome to Trolling with Logic, the podcast where we bring the hammer down on pseudoscience, ignorance, and unreason on a weekly basis. And when I say that the first time it sounds corny enough, but when I've said it 3 times it sounds
entertaining. I do agree that it's very well made, and it raises some interesting issues, but it's just not for me. Let's just put it that way.
Yep, and I'm the opposite. I like the slow, pretentious movies quite a lot, so... Marty, you can chime in with your jibe there for me.
Again?
Yes.
Yeah, apparently you like Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Ding, ding. Yeah, there we go. So that's, it's a draw right now
And in this
between
case,
myself-
the V'ger cloud is genetic modification.
Yes, but the V'ger cloud. But this one moves a lot faster than the V'ger cloud, basically.
Yeah, that it does.
But no, yeah, I really enjoy this. It's just my preferred kind of. I really enjoy slow burning science fiction movies. So it's basically, the ideas in that are quite weighty, and that's is a movie that gives you plenty to think about at the end. Its production design is fantastic. It's a unique kind of style. I think it's it's kind of been influential in a way that there were quite a few films afterwards that have employed this kind of production design since. Also we haven't discussed this in our outtakes for this, it's worth noting that this was the second...
Well, they do say the brain starts to deteriorate from the age of 30, so perhaps this is just a normal thing for aging filmmakers.
Yeah, but that's kind of, if you ever wanted to see... I think that's a bigger downfall on M. Night Shyamalan, because M. Night Shyamalan's early movies, they were good, but they're not studied by, philosophers or bioethics committees.
Well,
at least M. Night Shyamalan's name sounds like he's having a party, so...
Now, his early movies were fun, and they were interesting in that the whole twist thing. That there's always some really weird twist, and it's but you can only do that so many times.
But yeah, like I said, I just bring that up just to show like the maker of this movie that we're looking at, where he's gone in the future. So if there'd been genetic screening for him, I wonder would they have even let him make these first two movies.
Okay, I sort of have to go back to what I said and clarify something. It's not that I object to movies having a message or something like that. I said this in our last attempt to record this. It's not that I love the Michael Bay style of, that there has to be an explosion, a laugh out loud joke, or a pair of tits every 5 minutes, or I stop watching. That's not it at all. One of my
sounds really bad. My name is Nathan. With me is Marty.
Hello?
Hello. And Cal and Jen.
Hi there.
I'm just going to pretend I'm not here to panic you.
Yeah.
Today we're reviewing the 1997 cult science fiction film Gattaca, the story of a not too distant future in which designer babies are commonplace in society, in a future in which a person's worth is measured by the optimal genes with which they are custom designed before birth. This movie is about a future that's not only plausible, but may in fact be inevitable. This film has been assigned viewing in university classes on bioethics, which is mainly what this movie focuses on, more so than the science itself, because it highlights the intersection and conflict between biotechnology and ethics. So what are everybody's initial thoughts about this?
We'll go to Marty first.
Marty hates it.
Yes. Marty, give us your thoughts.
This is take 3, by the way.
Yes, this is take 3.
Okay, so I'm the ADD guy in this...
the Bayformers fan. He's the Bayformers fan.
Yeah, so you keep saying, I'm gonna kill you someday. I watch movies for entertainment value, and I just didn't find this movie entertaining.
Writing venture for Andrew Niccol, I believe his name is, and he also wrote The Truman Show. So he's written So he's written 2 fantastic bits of science fiction, in my view. And if you want to see how far downhill he's gone, he wrote The Host, and he wrote that really awful Justin Bieber film with... you remember where the time is the currency, if you've heard about it? See, it's not good.
When you say The Host, you're not talking about the cool South Korean one with like the monster.
No. The Host is a weird movie with some alien that inhabits a teenage girl's body, and it flips round, and it gets very questionable morally because she's in love with this guy. So depending on who's inhabiting her at the time, it's either she's really digging this or it's rapey.
And you can't even say that it's a better love story than Twilight, because the movie is based on a book by the author of the Twilight novels. So.
Yes, that's where Andrew Niccol's gone. He's gone from making Truman Show, which is a movie which has even got a psychological condition named after it now, Truman Show syndrome. He wrote this, which is, as he said, it's presented in bioethics classes, and then he's doing worse stories than Twilight.